بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. Brothers and sisters, during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the companions experienced enormous hardships in Mecca, in their own lands. Their own brothers, their own fathers, their own families ostracized them, kicked them out, exiled them, tortured them, excommunicated them, to the point that they had to seek refuge in another land. They were welcomed by the Ansar, the helpers of God, the residents of Medina, who welcomed them with open arms and gave freely from what they had. Whether it was little or much, they gave from what they had. In one of the stories that is very famous that many of us know of, there was one Sahabi, one of the Muhajir, one of those 10 that were promised paradise, Abdurrahman ibn Auf, radiyallahu anhu. He was amongst the entourage of Muhajirin, of the immigrants who entered Medina with literally nothing. Just the clothes on their back, perhaps a few essentials that they could carry on their persons, and that was it. Many of these people came from luxury. Many of them came from destitute backgrounds. Abdurrahman bin Auf himself was not known to be very rich when he was younger. And so when they entered the city, the Ansar tried their best to accommodate and be good hosts. And good hosts they were. It is said about Sa'd ibn Rabi', the person who was paired with Abdurrahman bin Auf to take care of him. He says, you know, Allah has blessed me with 2 gardens and 2 wives. Take one of my gardens, and I will even divorce one of my wives for you to marry her. Literally, I will give you half of everything I have. Abdurrahman bin Auf was not here as someone to just merely take. And if he had, nobody would have said anything. He was being offered this, he had nothing. And he could have taken it and no one would have said anything. But he said his famous words. He first made dua for the man. He said, may Allah bless your wealth and may He bless your family. Please point me in the direction of the marketplace. Please point me towards the souk, towards the market. And there he went, with not much, but something to sell. What was important was not what he had, but his mindset, that he wanted to earn with his own 2 hands. The marketplace was notorious, was well known that only certain tribes in Medina, including only a few of the select Jewish tribes, were able to barter and work in the marketplace and be able to sell, have the appropriate licensing, if you will. But he managed his way and he became rich. He became rich by the grace of Allah. And when we say rich, very rich. Not in the matter of years, not even in the matter of months, not even in the matter of weeks, within days. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had blessed him. The intention that he had, the charisma he showed, and the talent he possessed. Within a few days, the Prophet ﷺ witnesses Abdurrahman bin Auf, and he's dressed really nicely, and he, his beard is very nicely groomed, he's perfumed, he even has on a little bit of shading, of a different color. And the Prophet ﷺ looks at him astonished and says, Abdurrahman, what happened? already? What is this? And he said, Alhamdulillah, I recently just got married. And he said, you got married? With what? You had to bring a dowry, right? You have to take care of your wife. How did you get married? And he said, I gave a mahar, I gave a gold brick. A brick of gold. And the Prophet ﷺ prayed for him and said, you should have a walima, you should have a feast. And so within a few weeks of the Muslims coming into Medina with barely nothing, they were enjoying a feast by the hands of Abdurrahman ibn Auf. Brothers and sisters, why do I share this story? In many cases, either due to cultural influences, either in America or in other lands, or in the effect of other religions, sometimes we may have the mistaken notion that money is inherently evil. And that if someone is very rich, then there must be something wrong with them. They must be an oppressor. They must be someone who took advantage of others, someone who cheated their way through the system, someone who doesn't necessarily deserve this. But what we will learn from the Quran and Sunnah is of an ultimate balance. In the last few weeks we've been talking about living a simple life and really being independent, not needing the finer things per se. Today's khutbah is to look at the flip side of this as well, which is that it is okay for us to enjoy some of the luxuries and some of the goodness in this world, provided that we are grateful and that we give back with it as well. As one of the famous quotes goes, that famously attributed to Churchill, that what man gets gives him a living. What man gives him a life. And we see this over and over in the Quran and Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Like in the famous hadith that the hand that gives is better than the hand that takes. The idea in Islam and even in the Arabic language that you see that when you refer to someone who is well off, al-ghani is one of the terms used, one of the names of Allah even. And it doesn't just mean has loads of money in his bank account. But instead, the root of the meaning is independence. This person has freedom. This person is not beholden, is not indebted to someone. That they're able to make decisions on their own. They're not needing to check in with someone. They're not needing to run every permission by someone. They're not required to be somewhere at a certain time for a certain duration because someone else asked them to. But rather, they have certain privileges as it relates to other men and women, which gives them, of course, general freedom, but in the case of the Muslim, gives them more chance to do that which is pleasing to Allah. The scholars would have a very spirited debate. They would argue, who is better? The man who is poor but is patient, or the man who was given wealth but is grateful? In both, they are of course good, but which one is better? Is it better that we be poor? Now this might sound like just a philosophical discussion, but the reason it's important is that we as Muslims, do we feel guilty if Allah has given us money? Do we feel guilty if we're doing well but our families back home make 1/100th the salary that we might? That when we see others suffering and we have money, what are we supposed to feel? Should we forsake all of this? Should all of us just live in the masjid without an income and just trust in Allah without any work? Is that better for us? Would we get into heaven better if we gave up our jobs in the secular corporate world? So these have very real manifestations in our lives, and these are reasons why the scholars would discuss these matters. And the conclusion after much discussion is that, in fact, inshallah, the reward will be the same. For someone who is needy and is patient, someone who does not have much but is patient and has sabr, and someone who is well off and is grateful and actually is generous with that. In Sholihin, the chapter we are in now, the hadith are just plentiful, talking about the excellence of the one who has money and gives. Now one might ask, why are they equal? Why is it fair that someone who has a nice house, might even have a swimming pool, might even have tenants, might be a landlord, might drive a really nice car, why should they receive similar reward to someone who does not have much and is being patient? One of the reasons that is given is that it is so difficult. As we see around us, perhaps even in our own personal lives, that when you finally come across a luxury, perhaps imagine someone who just experienced AC for the first time. In the beginning, it's amazing, and they're so happy, they're barely turning it on, they're really enjoying that cool air, right, as they feel the AC. And then over time, few days, weeks, months pass, and now it's taken for granted. They always have the AC running. Even if they're not at home, just keep the AC on. So when I come home, I want to come home and just feel that cool blast. I don't want to wait for it to get better. And over time, if the AC is turned off by accident or it stops working, we get into a temper. We expect that cool air. What do you mean I have to use a normal fan? What do you mean we don't have electricity and we have to open the windows? We see even in such a simple use case that we start forgetting about the blessings. We stop being grateful for it. And this is something that we as humans are always tested with. And so for those of us that, alhamdulillah, have the luxury and privilege of living in a country right now with plentiful wealth, that yes, we all have troubles, and may Allah help us with our troubles, but we also have a lot. And the key right now for us is to show that gratitude, because that gratitude can really elevate us beyond our imagination. One hadith to use as an analogy, the Prophet ﷺ once said that the man who eats and is grateful for what he has eaten gets a similar reward to the one who was fasting and was patient. How many of us were grateful for the lunch we may have had before we entered the musalla? How many of us were happy with the water we drank in the morning, the coffee or tea we might have had? How many of us took a moment before we started eating and mentioned the name of Allah and just felt so happy knowing that we didn't have to worry about what am I going to eat for dinner? How am I going to eat for dinner? How many of us said, alhamdulillah, that we're not like many of our brothers and sisters across the world? For example, in the famous case of the man in Somalia who called the Sheikh and he said, "Oh Sheikh, does my fast count if I have no iftar to break it with?" How many of us gave charity today? Even $1, either to the masjid, to the poor, to others. Gratitude and being gratefulness for even what we have, even if not much, is the real test for us. In this time where there is abundance, there will come a time, we aren't there yet, where people want to give their zakat, but there's no one to give their zakat to. We're not quite there, but we're getting close. What will we do to be grateful? أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Brothers and sisters, wealth is something that is not just managed and just not measured by how many dollars you might have in your pocket or in your account, but it is measured in so many ways of the degrees of blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. Take our health, for example, a very special type of wealth. One that, especially in this time of COVID, with all of us with our masks on, can easily remember with several family members that may have passed away. May Allah grant all of them Jannah. Imam Shafi'i was famously reported to have said that health is similar to a crown that the wearer does not see, and the only one who sees this crown is the one who does not have this crown on. Imagine that someone is watching this live stream from their hospital bed right now. And they're looking around and they're seeing all these brothers and sisters that were able to sit cross-legged with all of their body parts, and they're able to listen, and they're able to take the luxury for a few minutes from their busy lives to come and sit on carpeted masajid. Imagine how they must feel. Imagine what they might want to give just for the opportunity to do this again. You remember just a few months ago we weren't able to congregate in the masjid. Alhamdulillah, that's been brought back. And so this is one type of wealth. The wealth of time, our youth. They often say that youth is a type of wealth that is wasted on the young. Meaning that oftentimes as we get older and we hit our 40s, 50s, 60s, and we get older, we wonder, oh, when I was 20 and I had my strong body and I could just go around even when I was 30, 40, I miss being able to just get out of bed and just be able to do things. I miss being able to pick up anything around. I miss being able to spend a full day with full attention, not feeling so lethargic, not feeling my body parts aching. Another type of wealth that we need to be grateful for. The Prophet ﷺ said that each of you should give charity for each one of the blessings that you have, for each part of your body parts. That removing something harmful from the road is charity. That helping someone cross the street, helping your Muslim brother is charity. Walking to the masjid using your feet is charity. Looking at your wife or your husband with happiness and giving upon them is charity. Every single part of our body, we should give some type of charity, some type of giving back. This is what distinguishes us. During the time of the Prophet ﷺ, when the Sahaba, many of the poor Sahaba, they came together and they were wondering, how do we compete against these rich Muslims that are giving so much? At the fundraising dinner, you might see the doctors, the well-to-do businessmen, the engineers, $10,000, $20,000, even more dollars. And we're here wondering, how about our $5, $10? What can we give if we're able to give? And he ﷺ said, may I give you a way that with this you may be able to come to where they are, maybe even surpass them. And they said, please tell us, O Rasulullah. And he says, say Alhamdulillah, say Allahu Akbar, say Subhanallah. Say the Azkar, Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar. Say this and you will reach that level of Azkar. And so they started doing that. But then they came back soon after and they said, oh Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, we started doing this Azkar, but the ones who are rich caught on and now they're doing it too. And the Prophet ﷺ smiled and he said, Allah gives to those whom He wills. Each one of us have been given blessings in different ways. And all of us have our struggles. Some might not have a lot of money, but they might have a lot of health, they might have a lot of time. Others, it might be the opposite. Everyone has some type of problem they're going through. But we also have a lot to be grateful for. And we cannot forget this. The point of this khutbah, brothers and sisters, is that Shaitan wants us and spends all of his time, every day of the week, trying to remind us of that which we don't have. We might not have the most fittest body. We might be struggling with mental health issues. We might have a family member who is sick. We might have issues with money. We might have issues with school. And the entire time, Shaitan wants us to fixate on that one thing that we don't have. Brothers and sisters, I am here to remind you of the words of the Prophet ﷺ and of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَلَئِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ وَلَئِن كَفَرْتُمْ إِنَّ عَذَابِي لَشَدِيدٌ. That when you are grateful and when you make shukr and you give thanks to Allah, I will increase you. And those who turn away, the punishment is great. All of us have something that we can be grateful for. So let us be grateful and first start off with saying Alhamdulillah, and secondly by giving back. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us amongst the shakireen. May He make us among those who are grateful for that which we have now and that which we will have in the future. May He make us patient with any troubles we are going through. And may He grant all of us Jannatul Firdaus al-A'la with the Prophet ﷺ and the righteous. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. وأقم الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله